Hi, I'm Brittany.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Katie, better known as Joiner.
We are three best friends and professionals, pediatric speech-language pathologists, and moms who try really, really hard. But we are by no means experts.
In many cases, we will be learning right along with you. The advice we offer is of a general nature and certainly does not replace the advice of a medical professional.
We hope you leave our conversation with something in your cup, whether it be laughter, new information, inspiration, a question. We hope we can fill your cup. Welcome to the Cup of Counsel podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to Cup of Counsel podcast. This is a pretty special episode. We're super excited because we have our very first guest. So this is something new for us and new for you listeners, and we're just flat out excited. So Joiner, what is in your cup tonight?
Well, what's in my real cup is actually coffee because I know, not a lot of fun, but I have some IEPs I got to work on after this. So I'm drinking coffee, which is like my first love. I love coffee so much. But in my other cup is curiosity and excitement to have our first guest here. I'm so excited.
Yes, we are so excited tonight. We have Ashley Harris Whaley, who is the creator of Disability Reframed. And I actually, when we started our Instagram page, I was stalking all sorts of people and I happened across Ashley's account and just fell in love with it. So I'm a little starstruck right now, actually, to be honest with you. So Ashley is also a pediatric speech-language pathologist, a lifelong disabled person with cerebral palsy. Ashley created Disability Reframed out of a desire for a societal re-education on disability. She lives in South Carolina with her husband, cat, and a German Shepherd puppy. She owns way too many pairs of shoes that she can't actually walk in. Welcome, Ashley. And I laughed at you at the end of your little bio. I like your sense of humor.
I mean, it's the God's honest truth. I try it on and I'm like, oh, I can do this. I could totally do this. And then it's like, I wear them out and I'm like, oh, no, this is abort mission. This was bad. Bad idea. So my closet is like a shoe graveyard of like either there are two subsections. They're the ones that have been worn once and then never worn again. And then there are the ones that have like the toes drug off of them that I wear every day. So it is what it is. But I'm so happy to be here. Thank y'all for having me.
Yeah.
Yes, we're happy to have you.
Thanks for being our guinea pig, our first guest, as we figure out how to do this with a fourth person.
It's so exciting in these days and times where you look at people's Instagram page, but then to be able to actually talk with them and see them is exciting. So I'm excited to actually have a conversation with you and be able to share your viewpoints with our listeners.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I think on the sort of the other side of that, the bigger the numbers get on Instagram or Twitter or any sort of social media platform, I think the further away from a human you become in the eyes of a lot of people who sort of start to see you as like a brand or a resource or a tool and not a person. So it's been an interesting line to walk between keeping my private life, very private. I don't share that online, for a reason, but then also trying to figure out a way to humanize myself to that audience also. So podcasts are a really fun way to do that. And that's why I enjoy them.
Well, if you want to just start out by telling us just a little bit about your childhood and about your disability and just give us a little bit more info.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess kind of a cool origin story. I was born 3 months prematurely while my parents were on vacation, actually. They went on vacation with their best friends to celebrate the 4th of July. My mom talked to her physician. He's like, your baby's not due to the beginning of October. It's fine. You'll be fine. Everything will be fine. Well, it wasn't really fine. They stayed in Charleston for 3 months, for the better part of 3 months while I was in the NICU there. And then, that's kind of how I made my auspicious entrance into the world. And because of that premature traumatic birth, I have cerebral palsy, which is basically caused by oxygen deprivation to the brain. And then that results in sort of motor planning and coordination and balance issues. My subset of cerebral palsy is spastic diplegia, which is the most common type. And it looks like spasticity in my lower limbs and then to a lesser extent sort of all over my body, basically, because, muscles are all connected, so it all works together. Nothing occurs in a vacuum. Yeah, pretty normal childhood, I guess. I grew up in a really, really rural area in Western North Carolina with no other disabled people. I was very much kind of like the lone disabled island in my world, the only kid that I knew, only person, period, kid or adult that was in my, immediate circle with a disability. And so that really formed the way I thought about my disability and that I trivialized it a lot. It was always like, oh, I just walk funny. That's all. But it's like, no, that's not, that's not really all. And so, the journey to a disabled identity for me has been a long one. I'm actually writing a book about that. So it's, or in part, I'm working on an essay collection that looks at the intersection of identity and disability and womanhood and all of those things and all of those themes. So I'm super excited about that. But pretty normal,
that's awesome.
Middle class, very rural life. I didn't know a whole lot about disability as an identity until probably college or post-college. So it's been a pretty fun ride for me in the recent past. My parents are fab. They did a fabulous job and they had no roadmap for raising a disabled kid with no support. This is the early 90s. There's no internet support groups and there certainly weren't any in-person ones in rural Western North Carolina.
Yeah, living in a rural area was probably something too.
Yeah, they did a pretty fantastic job. They just didn't make it a thing. And I think that has sort of informed how I approach it.
Tell us a little bit about the difference between person first and identity first. I know that this is a real big topic right now.
Really big.
And it's something for sure. When we started this podcast, I told Brittany and Joyner, because I was the one on our social media account, looking into all these things. And I was like, guys, we are behind on this new, not new, but what the preferred vocabulary is or terminology. And they were both like, really? What? We were taught person first.
Simply put, person first language puts personhood ahead of disability. So person with a disability, person with autism, and that can be extrapolated out to all sorts of different specific diagnoses. Identity first integrates a person's disability with their identity. So disabled person, autistic person, etc., etc. So without going too much into the history of all of it, person-first language really came about in the mid-century via the rehabilitative psychology movement and a lot of the sort of old guard of disability advocates, and especially those voices in the intellectual and developmental disability community at that time. It was very important for them to make the distinction of their personhood separate from their disability. Truly a different time and a different set of societal circumstances that they were working with, right? And so identity first is a much more modern line of thinking. Identity first language came about in a memo written by the National Federation for the Blind in the late 1990s. And they basically decried the use of both person first language and any kind of euphemistic language surrounding disability. Think special needs, that ilk of language. And so they basically made the argument that no other defining characteristic of a person is hedged using person first language. Like, right? We don't say a person who is a woman, a person who is a wife, a person, we don't like qualify a person who is gay. Like, we don't do that, right? We use like identity first descriptors for all of these things except disability, which kind of comes from the fact that, and this is a whole separate conversation for probably a whole nother episode, but comes from the fact that like disability makes people uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable to acknowledge that, but it's unfortunately largely true. And so person first language is sort of a mechanism of that, where it's a way of putting distance between a person and their disability. And most, I would venture to say, if not all, disabled adults, they prefer identity first language, right? Almost all of us, especially the autistic community, they are adamant that they not be called, for the most part, again, people with autism, because they see autism as completely integrated into themselves and not something that they can separate from themselves. So they really don't prefer person first language. And most disabled people don't either. I can't separate cerebral palsy from myself. I can't like take it off like a winter jacket and hang it up on a coat rack. Like, it's always there. It's always present. It literally like defines the way that my brain works. So, why separate that part of myself?
Had you given an example about like someone with glasses?
Well, I think I used that talking about both this conversation and special needs. It kind of fits for both. So you wouldn't say like, you wouldn't consider glasses a special need, right? Like, you're wearing glasses, but like you don't have special needs in air quotes. I mean, but like a wheelchair, even though it literally serves the exact same function as a pair of glasses in that it enables you to do something, that is a special need. And that just like doesn't pass the muster, right? Like, Why is that different? And I think all of us, both people in the advocacy and activist sphere and SLPs and the like, we need to take a good hard look about why we consider certain things to be deficits and differences. Like, what constitutes that? When other things like poor eyesight just zoom right under the radar because they're so ubiquitous. I would venture to say that like disabilities of all other kinds are just as ubiquitous. 20% of the population has one.
It was a hard concept for me to wrap my brain around because when you've done it one way for so long, and then hearing you explain that, I had an aha, as Oprah would say, I had an aha moment, because when you were saying you can't separate yourself from your disability, I always thought it was the person, like put the person first and then just like, and this is what they have. But you're right. That is the person as a whole saying you can't separate what they have from their person. So it's who they are.
You really can't. And my husband, he says that all the time. I wouldn't be this person without cerebral palsy. Like it sounds trite, but it's so true. Like literally nothing about my life would have turned out the way that it has. Like zero things. I mean, maybe my hair. I don't know. That would probably be the same. But aside from that, nothing would be the same. Yeah. Literally nothing.
Makes you who you are. So can you give an example of, sounds weird to say like, what should we call people, but like.
Okay, so this is where it gets tricky. I'm glad you asked that question, right? So let's talk about autism first, because that one's a little bit different and it kind of works in that way. So you would just say like, so-and-so is autistic. right? No qualifier needed. A lot of disabled people, myself included, would say, I would say I am a disabled person, but then I would, if I were being super specific and if someone needed more specificity than that, I would say I have cerebral palsy. Because it doesn't work to say Ashley is cerebral palsied.
Right.
I mean, that just does not roll off the tongue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a lot of people will kind of use person first, I guess, in that way, if we're talking specific diagnoses, because just linguistically, that's how it works, right? But like from an identity standpoint, like Ashley is a disabled person, not Ashley is a person with a disability.
You've posted before too, just ask the person, right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for saying that. That's probably the most important piece of this entire conversation, right? Because disability isn't a monolith. We're not all the same. We don't all think the same. We don't have all the same opinions. So there are people out there who do prefer person first language. There are fewer in number, but they are out there. So it's always best practice to ask. And it's tricky for us if we're working with peds, right? Because they can't always answer that question. But sort of where we come in is you get to subtly kind of work that little education in there for the parents if they're not even aware that identity first is an option. And they're probably not. Most of them wouldn't be, I wouldn't think. Just opening up that dialogue, I honestly think is like the number one thing that we can do. And some of them may not be receptive to it, they may adamantly prefer person first language for their child. Mm-hmm. And as a parent, that's their prerogative until their child is old enough to start sort of searching for that and answering those questions for themselves. But we can, at the very least, start the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Isn't report writing a struggle? Doesn't that language just bum you out? It bums me out. And I'm constantly trying to figure out how to write them better, but then still adhere to the expectations of my job. It's tough. I haven't figured it out yet. I'll let you know if I ever do. But right now I haven't.
I want to know the best way to write it in my reports because I want it to be, people read that, parents or physicians or whatever. And sometimes people will read your report and they will use the verbiage that you used in your report because you're the professional. So that's where my question was in my head. I'm thinking, I want to write the best vocabulary to use in my report because people tend to read them and then that's what they are using.
The fact that this is even a debate or a conversation that we're having, again, boils down to the fact that at its core, disability for most of history has made people deeply uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And because of that, the collective, we as a society have done everything we can to dance circles around that word and around that language and come up with other language, mostly euphemistic, that makes us feel better about ourselves, right? And now disabled people are leading the charge of undoing all of that and making the argument that disabled is not a bad word. It's not a dirty word. It's not something you should shush people from saying. We're, without sounding cheesy, we've sort of had to reclaim it and say, no, this is who we are. And we're not ashamed of it. We're not ashamed to use that word because it's factual, right? So, and you've got to think about it from a legalese, civil rights standpoint. What does the word, what does special needs guarantee me? Nothing. What does that language give me in the eyes of the law? Literally nothing. But the word disabled, that carries with it civil rights, a history, a culture that isn't taught and people don't know about. So we're having to kind of bring our own cultural revolution to the forefront, so to speak, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Whew, that was so good. I'm so glad we're doing this
I
podcast.
I know. I'm sitting here the whole time just thinking like, so many aha moments, so much
many.
like truth in your message of like disability makes people uncomfortable. Yeah, I will raise my hand. It makes me uncomfortable, like to address those things to parents. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like when I'm in a team meeting and we dance around like, ooh, the A word, or you know what I mean? Like those kinds of things.
Like just say autism for Pete's sake. Like,
oh, I don't know if they're ready for that. I don't think the parents are ready to hear that. Like, what are we doing?
We do parents such a humongous disservice by pretending that we are not seeing what we're seeing.
Yes.
We are not helping them. And this is going off book, but we have got to stop doing that. We have got to start being honest and not being full of shame and fear because by approaching, and we're talking about autism specifically right now, y'all, just going to lay it all out there. By doing what we're doing, we're perpetuating the stigma that autism is something to be scared of and something to be ashamed of and something to fear. And that is, we just cannot have that in our field. Yeah, we need to do better. I will climb down off the soapbox right now. But
that's great.
Don't get off of it. Stay up there. We need it. Just stay up there.
I'm done. I don't have any more questions.
People need, like, I think we all know people need to hear this, but we did not know how to put that into words. And you're just putting into words what we know people need to hear. So thank you for putting that all into words. I really hope our listeners have already learned so much in the first few minutes of this podcast.
I mean, I know I have.
Yeah. It's now an okay time to just ask you quickly to just talk about what inspired you to create your Instagram account. Because I've been following you, and I know that you started with like 300 followers and now you have like 31,000 or something crazy in like less than a year, right?
Yeah.
She's famous.
It's so true.
So what first of all, like what inspired you to do that? And then what's your I know you've talked about doing like a class and things like that. So what's your like goal, I guess?
Wait, Amy, just say it. Just say what's your secret? Because we want it.
No, we don't need her secret.
There is no secret.
Good content. That's her secret.
Her hair is so big. It's full of secrets.
She carries secrets in that hair.
Oh, gosh. Okay, where to start? So I guess, informally, I've been doing this my whole life, y'all. I joke that it's like the one true thing that I'm really good at. I'm like a serviceable SLP, okay? Like, I'm not a whiz. It does not come natural to me. It does not come natural to me at all. I have to work really hard at it. And this is the only thing in my entire life that has ever come completely natural to me without much work, as silly as that sounds. And I was, that kid who you asked me, like, well, okay, Ashley, like, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I would be like, okay, well, I'm going to be the president and I'm going to change the way society looks at disability. And, I graduated college and my brain matured finally. And I realized that like, maybe I'll settle for Congress instead of the presidency because I really don't have the mental bandwidth for that job. But the whole, I'm going to change how society looks at disability thing, like never went away. And people would ask me like specific questions about, well, how are you going to do that? And I would say, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And I just kind of kept that in my back pocket for a really long time. I worked in several different fields out of college, was pretty unfulfilled by all three of them. Then I went back to graduate school because I thought I've got to find a job that gives me, number one, a decent living, and number two, the flexibility that will eventually allow me to pursue the things that I really am most passionate about, which is this, not speech pathology. Sorry to all y'all who are listening. It's great. I love it, but it's not my life's passion. And so it just is what it is. And so I lucked out because I do enjoy it. Like, it's a great day job and I'm happy to have it. And then, of course, the world changed last March, right? I don't know, maybe this is heavy for podcasting, but it's integral to the whole story. I had a very early miscarriage last March, and I was just, a vicious combination of very, very sad and very, very bored. And I was like, all right, I've got to channel myself into something right now. And I had all this time on my hands. So I just changed the name of an old dormant Instagram account that I had that had 300 followers. I originally had created for my cat. So
I love that.
Mostly all people who knew me and my cat in real life.
I love that.
I assembled an informal focus group of probably about 10 friends, some of who are therapists, some of who are marketing people, a broad group, and was like, hey, I know you're not doing anything right now. I know that for a solid fact. So I really need to talk to you about something. Do you think this is dumb? Or do you think I can make something out of this? And they were all like, well, hell yeah, Ashley, what have you been waiting on? Get to it. And so I hired my friend. I sent her a Pinterest board and I said, here, help me turn this branding vision into something real. And she did. And so I just started. I didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing, if we're being perfectly honest. And I just started posting what I feel. And people ask me all the time, what's your secret, right, to growing a brand like this? I started at the end of May in 2020. So in less than a year's time, and I'm I literally don't have a secret. It's not in my hair. I promise it's not hiding. The only thing I know to tell people is I post when I feel things. I don't, and this is, I guess I'm a Cancer. I feel lots of things.
I love that you just said that.
I really don't know much about astrology at all, but that's what my friends tell me. I'm all up in my feelings all the time.
Just like a Cancer. Yep. Perfect Cancer.
I think I didn't answer the last part of that question, which is what's my next step, right? What have I got up my sleeve?
Yes.
Well, lots of irons in the proverbial fire right now, ladies. The first is I am trying to plan a workshop that centers around the language that we use around disability. Because I bet you I get 5 to 10 DMs a day about that. And I would be an old shriveled up lady if I took the time to respond to all of them. So what I'm going to do is aggregate all of that information into one place and present it and let it be very affordable. It's looking like maybe the end of May at this point for that, I hope. And I am working on a book proposal for my essay collection. So that is always been my number one life goal, besides the whole, disability and society thing, is writing a book. So that is on the horizon, and I'm super excited about that. So that's my two next steps, I guess.
Ashley, what is your favorite part of being an SLP, and what is your least favorite part about being an SLP?
I think my least favorite part is sort of the savior complex that our field has. I guess that's a bit heavy hitting, but here we go. You see it crop up in seemingly innocent things like, we're a voice for the voiceless, or, those kinds of things that SLPs love and really latch onto. And I think collectively as a field, we have a lot of hard looking to do at the ableism that we perpetuate in our jobs and the way that we view the people that we work with. We are not their saviors. We are a tool for them to use to, achieve whatever it is, whatever the end that their goal is. We're a tool to be used. We're not saving them. So I think our field that, and we could talk probably for a straight hour about this question alone, but I think that's a good starting point. You know, we need to do some good, hard, like introspection about like what are our motivations and like how do we really see ourselves fitting in the lives of our patients and clients and students.
And you said ableism. Can you define ableism?
So ableism is prejudice or biases against people who are disabled. There are a lot of better definitions out there, but on the fly, it's prejudice against disabled people.
Okay, I think that's a great explanation of your least favorite part of the field. I've never felt that explained, but again, you're once again like saying things that I think, but I can't like get them out of my head. So you're very talented, I guess is the right word. And you're very eloquent with your words.
Oh,
also, I love your little sayings. Like, that's not how I would pass the mustard. Did you say that earlier? Pass the mustard?
I guess, like, I don't know. I'm just very Southern and very Appalachian, and so stuff just comes out.
Southern has the best sayings, I feel like.
Yes, yeah.
And these are not even my best ones. But
oh, man.
He's like, give me time. Give me time.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
man.
So aside from that, what's your favorite part?
My favorite part. Okay, so I am a person who's spent a lot of time in medical or medical adjacent settings in my life, right? I've had a lot of doctors. I've had a lot of therapists. And aside from one person that I can think of, never in my childhood did I see someone in those jobs that looked like me. Never. And I had a physical therapist when I was a kid. I had a lot. Some of them sucked. Some of them were great. But I had one, and her name was Brenda, and she was like my favorite person in the world. And for 3 hours a week, because I went to physical therapy Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, baby, all the time. And she made me feel like a normal, like what is normal, but 6-year-old Ashley very much wanted to feel like a normal kid. And she was that for me. She didn't treat me differently. And so it was sort of a combination of like wanting to be Brenda for somebody else, but then also like wanting kids like to see, themselves represented in that world. And like, I get CP clients, and I have a couple right now, and I could just cry tears of joy because I love them so much. And I'm like, you deserve to like see yourself like reflected in your world. And I am literally the smallest, most insignificant part of that. But it's a start, right? It's a start for them to see that like there are like disabled people in the world, like living lives, having jobs, having families, like doing all the things that everyone else does. And representation matters. And I'm just trying to do my part,
That's great. Everybody needs to be Brenda.
Yeah.
Be a Brenda.
Be a Brenda.
Brenda. Oh my God. We're Facebook friends. I love her.
So touching on that subject, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh, gosh. I guess I would tell her that she would, in fact, figure out how to change the way society looks at disability, baby. We're doing the damn thing. We're doing it. We're doing it. That's what I would tell her, and she would be thrilled.
Yes, that's awesome.
She would be
Love
thrilled.
that.
Yes. That is so great.
Okay, next question. This one, I'm excited to hear what you say about this because it drives me nuts sometimes, mainstream media, when they display people with disabilities or just shows and movies. I've seen it displayed incorrectly. What do you think? Are there any shows that display it correctly?
Yeah, there are a couple, but there's a couple that I'm thinking of just off the top of my head. So, and they're mostly all CP related, so forgive me, but that's just, it's what I gravitate towards, I guess. There was this show a couple of years back called Speechless that I don't remember what major network it aired on, but it was one of the major ones that had really authentic representation of CP, and the main character was a person with CP. there was a show, I believe, that came out on Netflix a couple years ago called Special, that was written and produced by a comedian. I think his name's Ryan O'Connell. He also has CP, so that one's pretty authentic. There is a movie. It's actually an Indian movie. It's called Margarita with a Straw. That is a great one for accurate CP representation. And Ryan Haddad was a character on Netflix, The Politician. I don't know if y'all heard of that one, but it came out last year and it's had 2 seasons. And Ryan is an acquaintance of mine, and he is a character in that show with CP because he is also a real life person with CP. And I think the difference that in all 4 of these like portrayals that I'm talking about is that for the most part, like CP was not the driving plot of the entire thing. Especially like Ryan's character on The Politician, like CP had nothing to do with that entire storyline. He was just a person with CP playing a role of a person with CP. Like it wasn't centered around his disability. And I think that that's like the next big step for representation is like, stop making shows for disabled people that are about disability. Like we do other things. Like we do talk about other things besides disability. Like let us just be people in other scenarios and situations. But those are all 4 pretty solid examples, I'd say.
Tell us a little about your wheelchair journey. Do you want to do that?
Sure. That's an easy one. I just got my first custom wheelchair this past Christmas. It was like an early Christmas present. I am not a person who uses a wheelchair in my everyday, day-to-day living, and haven't, aside from surgery recovery, haven't ever. But I do use one for traveling and all of those things. So I always use just like bulky, gross, hospital-esque chairs that are like really heavy and like hard for me to push. I'm like a small person with like spindly arms, So I finally was like, I'm a big girl with a big girl job and big girl money. Like it's time to, make an investment in myself. And so I went through the glorious insurance process of acquiring this chair. It's pretty snazzy. It's carbon fiber frame, so it's super lightweight and easy to push. And my husband is basically 7 feet tall, so that's real. And so we got him some telescopic handles so that he doesn't have to like bend over at the waist and push me. And so we're really excited because now that the world is opening back up and we can travel, that would be the primary, reason for me to use it. We've already we're making big plans. My sister wants to go to New York this fall, and she was like, all right, Ash, you've got your wheels and I'm getting a pair of rollerblades so that I can push you and we're going to be freaking unstoppable. Like she was like, I'm going to get one of those whistles like they've got at the airport so that people know to just move out of the way. Because travel is
I have a really
tough.
good image in my head.
Yeah.
No.
She told me again this week, she's like, I got to get my rollerblades before we go to New York this fall. It's happening.
I cannot wait for at least one person to be in New York City when this happens and have happened to listen to this podcast. And they see you guys going down in Times Square and they're like,
zooming.
There she is. There she is. She did it.
There they go.
There they go.
There they go.
That's
so,
awesome.
Yeah, it was a fun journey. I'm excited to have more freedom for traveling and for farmers markets. That's what I'm after.
That's awesome.
I like that. I love farmers markets. So
Me too.
So Ashley, Can you tell us about ableism, which you kind of already hit on, and how we can be better allies?
Sure. Again, this is a bigger conversation, but I think the first step is recognizing that it exists, right? I say that out of all the other isms, ableism gets left out of the conversation a lot, right? We have these big, sweeping, overarching conversations about all the other isms, but we're sort of conspicuously absent from a lot of those same conversations. Bringing attention to the fact that it is in fact a thing is number one, right? And then I think what non-disabled people can do that is most important is just listen to disabled people. You know, for most of modern recent history, any narrative about disability has been written by a non-disabled person for the consumption of a non-disabled person. And it shows, you know, disabled people have always been left out of the conversations about our own selves. And we're maybe come off as kind of like abrasive and bitter and angry when having these discussions, but it's really that we're just tired, you know, like we're tired of being left out of our own conversations and we're just not really allowing it anymore. So there are so many really, really talented disabled people, both people with large platforms and people without them, because that's not the be all end all, right? That are doing like really good, honest, hard work to talk about ableism, to talk about all of the issues that the disability community faces. And all that we need for non-disabled people to do is just to listen and not talk over top of us.
I think that's a great answer. And it is a privilege to be able to have you on our podcast as a guest and have this platform. And I know that it is such a gift to be able to listen to you say. I've had numerous aha moments, and it's been such a gift to have you doing this work. So I think we all can thank you for sharing your knowledge and your activism in this field. So we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
We do have one more question for you. The three of us are parents, and we have a lot of parents listening now. What is the best way to teach our own children about interacting with and being an ally or friend to another child or person with a disability? And how do we do this the right, quote, way for the next generation?
I think it comes down to you've got to normalize it for them, right? All right. So let's start off with the statement that it's not disabled people's job to educate the collective, your children about disability, right? Like we're already doing enough of that. You guys are parents. It's your job to teach them. And so how you do that is you learn, you listen, you surround yourself with disabled voices and what they're saying. And then in tandem with that, you provide your children with disability representation in their world of learn and play, in their books, in their toys, in their TV shows, in their movies, and you normalize it for them so that instead of being this weird, uncomfortable, scary anomaly when they see a person in the grocery store and they are like, ew, mommy, what's wrong with them? And then they make that person feel viscerally uncomfortable. Kids can be ableist little jerks too, you know, like they don't get a free pass just because they're kids. But how we prevent that is through exposure. The more they're exposed to disability in a healthy way that showcases it as not some kind of like inspiration or some kind of tragedy, because it's not either of those things. It's just a part of the human condition, right? So if you're presenting it in that way to your children over and over and over again, then that's how they're going to come to view it. And that's how you as parents are doing the work to make the next generation of people less ableist. And I am, like I said, doing that collaboration this week on Instagram. And as a part of that, I'm putting together a highlight reel of books with swipe up links. And that's going to be saved on my profile. So if you're interested in learning about specifically like what books you can get for your kids, there will be a resource guide for you at some point in the next week.
Yeah, I think I'm excited that you're focusing on that this upcoming week.
I know that's going to be a great focus.
Yeah,
I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's a whole week of content with the other account that I'm collaborating with is Big Little Feelings, and they're all about toddlers. So they've got a pretty sizable audience, so it should hopefully be far reaching.
Good.
Oh, that's great. We'll be sure to tag you, but just as a reminder on here, your Instagram handle is Disability Reframed, correct?
Absolutely. And that is also my website.
And your website. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that is all of our questions, which kind of bums me out because you have been so much fun and so eye-opening to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Y'all have been fun. I've enjoyed it. We could always do it again. We got plenty of other things we could have expounded upon.
So much.
That is very true. That's true. So we are going to invite you to tell us what is in your to-go cup, Ashley.
Oh, gosh. Well, in my real cup, or my real can, I guess, is a blackberry seltzer, wilding out on this Sunday night. And then in my proverbial cup is, I guess, just a lot of excitement. I think, disability is finally becoming a part of the zeitgeist. It's finally becoming a part of the larger conversation, and people are listening. It's easy to harp on that you need to listen, but people are, right? I wouldn't be sitting here with y'all if people weren't listening. And so that gives me a lot of hope. Like, the tide is turning. People are learning and listening, and I think that forward momentum is only going to keep propelling us forward, and we're going to have a lot more allies alongside us as we go. So it just fills me with some hope and excitement. And ideally, one of these days, I'll be out of a job, and, disability advocacy and activism won't need to be a thing. So that's what we're all shooting for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's awesome. And I will just piggyback on that really quick. You have taught us a whole lot just in the few months that we've known who you are. And one of those things that we have added to our podcast is the ability to go watch closed captioning of our episodes.
Oh, yay.
Your Instagram inspired us and, let us know, like, hey, what about our hearing impaired community? So all of our episodes will be available to watch the closed captioning.
That's fabulous.
So, you're inspiring people across the globe.
You're doing it.
We're lucky. We're really lucky we got to talk to you. So,
well, I've enjoyed it, ladies. Thank y'all for having me. For real.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's a wrap.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you liked what you heard, please hit subscribe or follow so you know each time a new episode is posted.
Please do us a giant favor and join our Facebook group and follow our Instagram page, Cup of Counsel Podcast. A review would really help us out too.
Let us know what you loved, what you want to hear more about, and what we could do to improve this podcast to make it the most meaningful for you. Thank you.